manages unions, federal law excluded executive employees from collective bargaining. Trump's an unlimited ability to bar all employees from unionization. Ficking and 125 Trump issued deal excludes federal employees from labor law. TBS 3 million represented by unions, arbitration, bargaining, and security. However, the FSO members president of using including employee indicated security work over from the exclusive representation plan earlier on limited state security can session that never security really such fundamental arbitration only 5 force of years as the never arbitration only for action based on security makes every employee fireable. Kelly 25 versus surcharge employees wishing to protection security class 1 order appointed most employees are going to salaries lower than promise with counterparts and not negotiations with the labor federal office operating the can be specific financial user capture unions are free to be fired likely to set the right civil services in America the worst crisis we saw transition consequences are rejected every month from the service. The brink is now. Politicization has created a crisis in every corner of government. Quo 828 is the unitary executive term to feel to the Senate is like especially body who advocated them and firing what is losing a lot of discredit across every corner of government including the CDC, the workers' men, departing of the government, realizes the theoretic government are for crisis disaster, pandemic, recent exos prove Wagner 828, Trump said a new exo targeting unions, the IT, the POTO, and the NWS as well as NASA. Strong civil service structurally caps every existential risk. Schulman 22, 70% in security civil service bench makes rural and cash for ever some nuclear tax monster. Big demanding exciting manager to make it possible to perform an extreme myself for advice for misguided losses on the stream of the energy goggles. Russian difference on new Chinese capabilities, American short model, and nuclear civil service unions personally cross president to take on nuclear security can versus America. Food safety more because qualifications not party give advice based on data fear of reprisal that also greenlights Trump's authoritarian consolidation of the executive and kills the advocacy of every agency. Handler 25 Trump's assault on the workforce and consequential for the executive law allows unions to push the structural deregulation plus the condition to arrive. Service to the APA, the UI from the carrying special data for unions one of the most important line defense because sometimes teams are relatively serve the corporation against unions have policy lobbying bringing public parties and attacking federal policy from rights and value and resident well organized group shall overall peace full seal demolition federal labor sending CBAs and excluding federal service and bargaining absent unionization. Trump creates a government sycophants that destroys every agency and unleashes its structural authoritarianism. Perez 25 term reason union superior authority would be unconstitutional acted through the executives make every executive employee fireable for the services guarantee the office police system and the service for lawyers loss of expertise and employees working special will ensure continuity knowledge reducing mistakes out of the circle policy service regime is unbiased the company service to be the service administrative service acceptable resources supporting partners and agenda Trump over to new election service resign from the Trump backpedal presidents different sources and some additional agency government second best cannot change the authorities protecting versus exploitation of his own policy board of legal misconduct their releasing of election data short transparency concentration of bureaucratic power sense opponents result in defining democratic values. Trumpian authoritarianism causes extinction. Onus 25 mortals change the crisis conflicts in Europe and the Middle East economy migration climate change public health and democracy not fighting health floating with Trump going instability after the showcase level instability Ukraine Palestine underscore Russian war space order does shift into world security and diversion arms road away from the levels of our protection and security fellow during levels of citizen security and international risk environments of the attorneys democracy for the carol counterweight may emerge democracy solves war our data is the only link that avoids statistical noise am I and low 21 in access of experiment never will have access to navigate models to the defining relationships between the democratic and other least factors for smoking and cancer temperature survival system evidence for democratic peace and public goods AI biotech WDs cause extinction Belfield 23 totalitarians for extinction battle dealing with disaster like now wars in the personalization center for information chance of memory say those cooperation transparency limits agreement for pandemics climate change AI biotech totalitarian war versus extinction autocratic peace is inherently unstable Richmond 25 the authoritarian challenge papers one vision this was an autocratic political operation under its automatic those with this in front of the model peacemaking under civil society where religion under the return of war autocratic states with their cooperation flood of reaction and also peacemaking aid civil society peace defense use of force proclamation of the negative peace with instabilities terminations gut the CDC preventing response to disease Tong 25 directed the agencies terminate employees on mass with the workforce years of actual of avian flu of CDC staff load disease shall reduce the workforce of agencies doctors professor of professional service responsible for helping combat academic research the ACA and the medical devices risk is high executive decision making is key to prevent transmission Buchler 25 scientists agree the research feminist own climate change migration globalization welfare making city choose these preventive public threats and boundaries that's been our city of crucial crusade decision the executive level come out a new virus long time on which officials sharing for deploy countermeasures extinction Kim at all 21 epidemics threaten human life appearing on disability permanent disease can affect all ones human networks the extinction of active smallpox SARS and will affect a large population risk increase mobility and within human kind infections overall native represent freedom studies based casting also deductive quantum assessment because there are various disease characteristics of real certain disease leading to human extinction defense is wrong intermediate virulence AMR zoonosis and mutation overall all trade-offs MPRA at all 25 trade-offs argument no virulence to be optimal there disease the result of the changes solutions the host goes master talk looking for certain disease through AMR process maintain facial certain infection but infection already established only way to pursue cannabis against mutation pathogen by animals or virtue increase population erosion of environments is also an impact filter Taylor 23 cooperation and peace months 120 degrees 5 percent to 2% air pandemics more like an agri complex and pandemic and balance problem pandemic drivers as we were crossing accelerated quality increasing risk attraction lockdown investment peace game restriction resulting in countries being able to pay down leading instability and risks and bargaining is key to prevent EPA overstretch Shoemaker 25 workers are hoping unions have uploaded after checking the workers of the CBS and shows employees on fund the company's 5% spending leave staffing on level was under CBS doing small and include regulate for African pollution for climate change administration with get polluted by sending rules relaxing enforcement about abandoning science otherwise pollution cascade CB the internet the CBS has a record of 60,000 lives of lives in BCS must be enforced must get workers fully probably not many meaningless for working themselves CB and small particular that's a particular represented images of the ecosystem self-real, not surveillance, body president, from personal political balloons, ozone, critical political levels of damage ecosystem, not for feasible and losses make, EPA, make sure EPA oversees safe land, reduce pollution, extinction, and it collapses the ozone layer, Fuller et al. 22 pollution is existential different sustainability, particular materials, so far losses, sexual disease, attributable greater than estimates, sexual deaths, after your larger data, the genetic pollution results, particular methods, Watson, HFCs, 50,000 times higher carbon disease, particular low subsidies, affecting walls, affects fertility, disease, cancer, resources, vaccine, pollution associated with mortality from COVID, ozone is existential, counter new threats is key, wins for 24 hours, and protects people and system for UV protection, their faces, new threats, politicization of the FTC collapses its independence, making antitrust enforcement impossible. Total 25 FTC can only be politically motivated by case laws, vulnerabilities. The research focus on indicating the FTC can use agency weapons and Trump or subsidiary Trump favor sacrifice the couple of both the judiciary, public access, and the organization of its staff and legitimacy, big tech regulations, coalescing globally now with strong U.S. antitrust laws. Keith Wizard, Capital Resource 25, Wave of Craft, and Digital Powers, governments, deployment, competition, diminishing populism, based on the specific companies, more than includes regulars must have big tech company, U.S. where the future is not attack, regulars face a strong agenda for business target all over. So, to exception, the rules of PDs and committed conduct various sectors absent regulation, big tech causes extinction on Sang 23. There's the industry controls, tech lobbies, factories, hostility, profit, they construct the simulators, correct, tech images, really good point, killing profits, and regimes, long settings, those tests, looking surveillance, emission, the terrorists, migrants, local resources, were defined with the fundamental resource, plantation, crushing, workers, association, ownership, innovation, unit, blender, world assignment, who are eligible, attempt, exchange, cyber, society, surveillance, more limited development force, repression, existential risk, thus a proposal, the United States federal government should substantially increase collective bargaining rights for federal employees in the United States. Only the plan solves one, collective bargaining, those rights ensure negotiations, and litigation that checks Trump, Handler, 25 servants, labor rights service, protecting the president, power to manage the executive influence, she starts, limit tools and control, and service make decisions about negotiating, evaluation, proceeding, engineering policy, by the UPN, innovation, protection for scientific integrity, and ability to scientific judgment, they rights affecting whether Trump can relocate agency work to push back against the litigation, Irish given relationship by unions, administration is going to be collective bargaining is both necessary and sufficient for policy, autonomy, and competence and protection, Handler 24, civil service check, press power through, CB, components of the CB, improvements in labor is complicated, each worker supports no longer people of the size and expertise monitor, evidence for press bargaining, ability, substantial by leveraging expertise, resources, and for discussion, including challenge policy, press, CB, policy, Trump's leverage rights to impose policies of the structure of executive order, attack, and multiply, and pickle 1,000, education, demonstrate the challenges, assumption, and this is top now, also means press power, capacity, other ways committed to the unitary security, crisis, of democratic represent policies, we get the times to approach evidence, negotiating, bill, animals, branches, surplus, regularly, CB, changing the force, press, all decisions, shape, closing, president, use the implement policy standards, president, shall presume, operate top down, more of market strategy, capital agencies, political consent, release, not doing worse, including funding pay, doing structure, the lectures, brand new examples, or Trump department meets for resisting labor litigation, also continues subsidy policy, and 80% of your ways, operations, not labor, say, third, the only quarter, MSP, critics, accused, less than all efficient, efficacy, estimated, committee, ability, lead, criticism, we got it, even though not union, use sex use, over our objection, management, top, influence, department, traffic, unions, background, consistent, relaxation, CB, power, expertise, language, deficit, achieve power, with the threat, step, agency, cooperate, and take references to policy 2, at will employment, the F, strikes down schedule F, orders and basis that Trump illegally violated the will of Congress, solving executive overreach press, 25, the acting Congress, conscious opportunity that can purchasing, control the Senate, and ask for recruitment, spirit, and another sex and increase possibility of person, appointees can records from the technology, what appointees Trump's application be contrary to the case all says, that do not grant the power to eliminate technology to be shut down. Okay, I have time for one card that staves of federal filing, Apple employment is the key internal link to downsizing, capital and 25 Trump son, measure that would make workers enjoy sharp protections, fireable workers can be fired for justifiable cause, Trump can fire for any reasons, release, cuts after the first round, the challenges many getting reinstated, no neg fiat, no reciprocal neg rest, too many policy options, time for I. Democracy is correlated with peace because it causes the pacifying effect of other variables. Schwartz 24 patterns. Found democratic leaders in our wars loser more than autocratic. When democracies come into conflict, they do so peacefully. Only above some threshold, religious side profit source, arrested being covered, and others increase the threshold for increasing resources for increase the threshold, bringing out leverage, restricting leaders to bargain their throne. Theoretical reasons to believe that the women in democratic institution may reinforce their tendencies towards peace, even if the underlying mechanism for the DPT is hazy. The empirical record is not even close. Doyle 24 wars carried up democracies, not disprove democratic peace, the global division from democratic peace, the lines where limited the authoritarian one strategy, the relationship statistically, sitting control of proximity, wealth and trade, democrats, delegate powers, making multilateral bodies, no favor and peace, work for democrats. After sway for makes all the factors together, DPT can reasonable governments for freedom, but the electoral conference are peaceful resolve that fragmenting the order to disengage and raise the likelihood of prolif. I can sum this up. Do you want to start? Sure.
The plans in general are all about Trump interfering with agency independence, but it also speaks broadly to just like Republicans corporate. Why does reversing just Trump alone prevent?
I would disagree with the characterization that it's just about Trump interfering with agency independence, because it's also about a structural hollowing out of the agencies themselves. Regardless of independence, regardless of whether the agencies are aligned politically to support Trump or other agencies, it doesn't matter if they don't have the staff that are able to execute policy. Those two things are distinct.
For example, FTC impact is about Ferguson, whatever.
Well, no, it's about Ferguson, but it's also about the FTC not having any people, so they can't win cases. Those two things are both about
him deciding cases in pursuit of Trump's agenda.
That is one internal link. That is certainly a good one, but it is only one of them.
Okay, I guess even if there are enough staff to carry out the functions, what prevents
point is that agencies, post-plan agencies having collective bargaining rights have the ability to resist top-down directives. Our handler,
I guess that
handler,
question,
yeah.
what is the incentive or like very good evidence that those workers would be willing to pursue such?
The handler evidence, both the card on the advantage and the card under solvency, are fantastic about this. It says that workers want to resist Trump basically by any means. The people that are working in the government, right? No, it does. The people that are
My question is more like they can resist Trump, but what like very good evidence that they support the ideals, for example, of not gutting the EPA.
Well, that's the thing that I was just about to say, which is that when our evidence is describing the civil service, this is not like the rotational people that come in and out with every president. This is the people that have worked at like the EPA or the IRS or whatever for 25 years, have dedicated their entire lives to enforcing these regulations and care about it a lot, independent of who's president, independent of what the government looks like. These people care about executing policy directives.
So the plan only increases staffing? Like what's bargaining look like after that?
Well, the plan increases the rights that those workers have. The effect of the plan is to increase staffing because the executive orders that scheduled out these people and fired them will be reversed. But a mandate of the plan is to increase the rights that those workers have within their agencies. They can bargain with the agencies in order to extract concessions.
Okay. In the context of this Taylor evidence, is this about disease solving? Like, why is disease cooperation overwhelms other sort of?
The Taylor evidence indicates that pandemics inflate other societal stressors, which means that things like inequality, fault lines across political divisions, etc., make conflict more prevalent.
You've also read like other impacts that contradict this,
Nope.
this basic premise. That's just like other things inhibit global cooperation. So what about disease overwhelms? Like
Other things are bad for global cooperation, like authoritarianism. Disease is also bad for global cooperation.
Sure.
But the things that disease is bad for are things that are also symptoms of
CDC,
authoritarianism. Yeah.
like once you present the CDC that enables global co-op.
The Buchler evidence indicates that executive level decision making and careful pandemic planning is sufficient. It says that officials are able to.
Other people or like
It says that officials are able to share information and quote effectively deploy countermeasures against future pandemics. Yeah. Sorry, I didn't hear you. That's a lot. Are you talking about solvency or just the advantage? That's a mistake.
So you're conceding solvency?
Advantage accountability. The United States federal government should increase funding for rehabilitation, research and development of vaccines, and plan for technology, expand modernized pathogen surveillance and intelligence to rehire, and refrain from laying off environmental protection new workers and tech, toxic particles into the atmosphere, intelligence, allows rapid and preemptive disease responsibility, 23 research and platform tech, enable early access to vaccine platforms, allow rapid production, warehousing, collaboration, and push sharing, rural research and flexible platforms, help speed response research and more bicycle and pathogen requirements, continuous funding commitments to rapid development, stop layoffs, curve pollution, and serve from 1 station marker, 25 cost and injection fronts, ozone clouds, keep 16 cost effective cost counter, ozone loss, neutralizing acid from metabolic cycles, aerosol, and geoengineering, repair the ozone layer, T, 80% strength and collective bargaining, must reach at least 80% coverage, data, and T is strictly alright, 25 for victory, assess collective bargaining, use for future policy, national plans, protect people party overview, intervention, occurs, and collective bridge, to industrial relations, 80% coverage, and total which countries must develop plans, as collective bargaining, present on application results, but of every 2 ways of achieving 80% of multi for applications, the whole sector extension, mechanisms substantially to legislature 21, so this means not less than 80% does not appear to be the final source of the given meeting, all, but it's a given amount, vote out for 1, limit the line to use force, the next to be predicted 100 of industries and mechanisms 2, ground 40 is, require large changes for the status quo, and they shall link unique by like gas baseball, as existing corporate collective bargaining policies, Tito, CBS, collective bargaining rights, and federal workers or representation representative to negotiate with employer over conditions. Agreements are excluded. 15. Phrasing error refers to rights suggested. A representative work collectively through a representative with employer respective wages, hours, and conditions of employment, collective bargaining, continue to include right to be a consultant. If working about sexual assault and conditions CPR, therefore not subject to agreement phrase, refer to process that was understood and now required good negotiations to pass over conditions of violation of the plan of prosecuting to the collective bargaining agreements for hire. Federal workers 1 limits the terms of agreement open the floodgates to infinite stipulations. 2 is ground collective agreements are vast. Mooting core objections and exactly uniqueness. The race the United States federal government should announce and conform to a policy reversing Trump administration costs and signs R&D funding announced and conform to a policy returning trade barriers to 2024 levels, not interfering with the federal deposit insurance corporation operations running Donald J. Trump from fire Jerome Powell rolling back Trump's terror assault number train 25 Huggins afraid President the pivot declared victory having struck deals while taking a step back from Brexit simply announcing rates lower tariffs to zero. Trump has the opportunity to pivot reversing funding cuts all CIP 25 Congress of the NIS and asset NOA and asset friend precision of investments insides weak job guarantees rate cuts to be R's 95 August was settled with the federal reserve because it was low down to the market fits to cost 75% chance for kind of 3 remaining immediate labor market conservative to second argument cooling job market front national bank against 1 time costing products rising inflation the plan creates a lucrative asset option for workers across the economy for against the ability to wage hike that's rising cost industry 25 to 15 days with things to wages increasing the outside union for other workers in other industries increasing further increasing their wages and then increase the value of the asset option the plus further increasing the outside option other industries that want you to change the present asset option goes 1.7 day we able to believe people lose also versus high rates to start innovation in the tech sector 124 high interest rates discreet depression tech leanness lower innovation that living growth studies found these innovation indicators aggregate investment in the FTPCR and R&D have had revenue will put a rise in rates while R&D spending fall 3% VC and 25% cash and innovation decline by 9% for low overall economic up and PCP reduced aggregate maintenance software to innovate less than develop new products has to be some investors have to have a risk reduce financing and short roads that funding fall 30% decline in personal knowledge to be bad for the important tech analytics including more effective by raising innovation bolsters shadow goes in that conversation to black swan 24 tech brings prosperity advances run rest of the vulnerable to play service tomorrow I'll do make more or less the time to reverse policy and longer tech current hazards to zero catastrophes of vulnerable situations got down to policy ready because it's curve has rate falling the second bench safety is luxury good wealth intention and the same production capacity increase benefits changing policy the future can into good conditions affordability financial low benefits survival impossible factor of the visual and favor conditions climate policy rest of the logical consequences body innovation worth not survival or account for the office of diversion about the fair reform of Biden catastrophic risk abuse eventually increasing collective bargaining rights for federal employees in the United States industry complex United States federal government to implement the best outcome on a cost benefit analysis regulatory review of the area optimizes policy and avoids backlash revised 24 or review essential important U.S. agencies made or which determines criteria including DC and one safety bid resolve or concludes any published review reverse back the new deal into regulation criticality legislative lawsuits benefit injunction or review ensure any regulation authorized or expanded state time and makes it administrative for PCA for charge of way to analyze problem ensuring it can be made in the light of age science and economics mainstream or reviews will deliver to mitigate etc. Liver more 22 test and do convert capacity to generate kind of software risk against and challenges to identify interventions CPA has been a long category however evaluation last traditional area CPA analysis or review that area but it plays limited role in understanding risk review or management opportunity to address risk and identify gaps count on the efficiency of office national action to eliminate congressional constitutional conventions agreed collective bargaining rights for federal employees in the United States. That solves Andreas 24 efforts to redefine labor present challenge the Constitution, labor protect rights and bargain, labor existing exception of speech, association of property to give guarantee of free labor, putting pressure on Constitution, politics. The United States federal government should renew the 2015 cybersecurity and infrastructure security agencies. CSR renewal will pass now, but requires quick action to avoid lapsing parallels. 19 takeaways advocate for renewal, hopeful Congress reaffirms while holding markup. Sense addressing but delay reflects process. Labor reform takes from capital. Ignites backlash and assures rollback presumption by Madeline 21 properly put at the amount of limitations budget and regs circumstances supported targeted lawsuits filed and new legislation introduced having to back and water down the original core business from England and new labor will be undermined. Sex and arbitrary cyber tax and protect medical infrastructure project 25 reservoir and last CFL UCW bipartisan agreement section to be reauthorized. Clean path for rail provision needed to find against from Chinese actors. Running group cyber tax go nuclear claim 19 escalation from cyber tax. Major powers around to the blade disrupting arbitrary systems. Consequences may potentially lead to without landing the attacks on military targets racing nuclear. Conflict psychology collective bargaining rights are committed to the structural colonial dispossession but for absolute refusal of settler control Angler. Turning colonialism not going present with digital population constitution challenges settler contracts to eliminate. Natives only make space for settler natives that into labor change back to the associations people of land forcing constructive undertaking. In American colonial practice incorporating landed capital systems labor expanding developed class ranking after the settler societies and colonial pities, which is especially labor power land and competition between other labor capital can be resolved with quality and continue to expand and intensify. Dispossession improvement to open settler work committed made accumulation through occupation of land services. Work with all premise on control of land dispossession taxes settler committees and also dispossession lands immediate against the goals of the United Labor to arrange for settlement of work to economic performance by the redistribution settler struggle wage number distribution of wealth within the population but the struggle that the settler regime is determined advantage. Democratic pieces empirically back up its various but democracy are more welcome back 24 DVD assume Norway specific philosophical about the empirical BT uses assumptions if they are fact back financial also running doors into the region on average cause the levels north either influence willingness to attack extreme stop whether wrong or present some to know the influence willing to attack other policy studies did connect from that study did have the ability to discriminate across more peaceful towards all regime comparison shut down to non-peaceful towards that more welcome can assume across to be work on analysis influence the region lost sailing last day because by matter as well as Hawkins the way study did no control not entangle from types of other activities so democracies prevent public goods political ignorance irrationality short-termism obstruct effective response which also answers this civil service and back border, 24 aspects, pandemics, volcanic eruptions, all explosion, due to parents, everybody greenhouse and blooming FCs becoming informed, costly, manipulatively beneficial, taken to confirm what is integrated, support human policy, rationality, can be penalized, irrational, voters from irrational beliefs, and not suited to the protection of virtue, sure biases, and class issues, and uncertainties of value, beneficial content, daily risk, law to aspects, determines private policy, other motivation, and hindering policy, prior to the employment, and imposing calculated chance, also financial incentives, but to define order to focus on short-term democracy, ignites maritime flashpoints, local values, from nationalism, and insecurity mission, turns the maritime claims from econ as developed countries, agrees with the United States with free election, property rights, and hand in hand with maritime public large face claim. Thus far, cause of removal of passion to not appropriate time, high military disputes, and multiple fish democrats. He's engaged frequently in claims by very analysis of demonstrates significantly higher risk for claims that are not dead. Converted population model, we saw 46% higher conflict between Denver, frequent maritime missions, create bone of intervention, and threaten peace, and in future species will become contested with Israel's environment disputes, with failure to become multiple fish and land, and violent, following risk, conflict with maritime, conflict with militarized maritime competition escalates nuclear war, hostile 24 warranty, evolved new viewpoints, largest assets, and seas turned into different from anywhere else due to destroy vessel superstructure through overpassion by Airbus energy, internet and harm through shockwave underwater can destroy a whole nukes at sea, complicated employment of vessel and continental competition, no through Western policy favor drawing no distinction between various nuclear democracy makes disease control possible, limits 23 democracy, black emergency clause define COVID differently, has to be a difference between systematic coordination and CSC challenges, UK fish challenges, the cost of Gulf Authority, thieves, democracy, control, committee, movement, mission, political cost, media, custom to freedom of preservation, trade, equity, freedoms of public health, down to practice, and funding, critical media control, which represents dissent and weaker opposition during crisis democracy, blocks time to response, and fuels food insecurity, ensuring global cost cutting is tried out for autocracy, named 25 different climate, electronic governments, benefits, and policy favors, cost of leading not under pressure, but populist first, mitigation, and counter-resistance, authoritarian governments, mobilizing, prior to all concentrated on fucking reduce emission, little public, and policy making quick habits, restriction on freedom of authoritarian governments, essential democracy, public struggle, fighting population, become challenging to warming, insecurity, like the rights of a country, gets used to understand by wars, and sensibility, non-economic regime, difficult to sign public, likely to find difficult to maintain our scientific testing and guarantee distinction is likely due to severity, interlink impacts, and lack of business. Abigail 22, the impact of harm of anything by review, vital, and physical, and effect on state community. A breach of rights, and opinion of society, raises the goods of the class, like substitution, economic struggle, fabric, civilization, and rules of whole voice, elevates to infinity scientists, alert, to societal class, credible, city, present, more significantly, to severity, magnitude, probability, and also presents no extinction from disease. Roaming 25 classroom will likely be extinction by 5 can be limited to by heterogeneity. Genetic trait confirms resistance or immunity, for example, virus, population, possession, the right to these or receive a non-lethal dose, even if highly lethal sufficient humans would survive lethal pattern, lethal host, who transmission, less tolerance, have more chance of spreading even when their reservoir exists, global diffusion, not sufficient, and much recovery. Community on Earth can attract vibes and many reasons remain aesthetic. Community would isolate Trump's foreign policy as irrational and calculated. Prosecution 24 something Trump would see do pain take US energy because will turn chaos out of these fears will find no Trump left to stimulate and greater pressure on Tehran. Let's the Abraham Accords plan allows to contribute to the answer of the day promoted policy and prevent Europe from getting caught in Moscow and Beijing garbage stuff. Love is imperative while Trump will demand spending a little strengthened into a second Trump would look for common ground with allies in China, Russia, Iran. No go using peace. Chemical impact is wrong. Korea 18 pollution cause diaphragm, typhoid, apple, weed poison. Ourselves to extinction involved in clean air, water, and damage to waste likely to find pollutants or so widely recognized in consequence of the local mental media because governments act. Go for good aspirin, yes, negative, it's a logical response to AFIA, and it is key to net flash will be impacted out in the 20 no ozone or aerosols impact Riva. 18 thanks to Montreal, ozone depletion being in reverse end of world team far-fetched excessive pollution and aerosol loading suggested about therefore we poison ourselves for the extinction of while taking clean air and water reduce pollution. The economic becomes circulated reflected to decline pollutants over our life and immediately reasonable to expect governments to act for a catastrophe or aerosol likely to be existential.
Okay. Are you good?
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Good now?
Yeah.
Cool. Status?
Conditional status goes over the last
Can you pick plans?
Yeah.
Can you amend counterplans?
Can we amend counterplans?
Yes.
What do you mean by amend?
Can you change the text of them in the block?
We can change the text of
Can you read to us the counterplans?
That's the same as
Okay, cool. The advantage counterplan, the last couple of planks, first of all, the plank that injects calculate particles into the atmosphere, do you just like unilaterally do that? Do we like tell other countries that we're going to do it?
The counterplan is fiat the United States and doesn't have any international action.
Where in the atmosphere? Like right above us? Do we do it like?
It's generally above the United States.
How do we get it up there? Like do we like?
Spaceships for one.
So we launch a rocket in there and it just drops
Also, I'm
off
sure
off
like
and
the
that
scientific
stops.
community has ways of getting particles to the atmosphere. We've done this
Sure.
before. Like
The
emissions get
plank
to the atmosphere
before
because
that-
of these particles.
The plank before that, rehire and refrain from laying off environmental protection workers. Do you fiat that they're rehired? Like they don't get the choice, they just like have to work back in their own job.
I think hire implies that there's like some sort of like process
doesn't.
by which these agreements are negotiated.
No,
If they don't want-
no. If you wanted that, you would have said like tender a job offer.
Anyone is
Instead of
welcome.
rehire.
Anyone is welcome to quit their job at any point, regardless of whether they're.
Well, no, you
rehired.
durably fiated that they're rehired and they can't be laid off. I don't know that you can actually.
I think that we can.
Okay, sure.
Just because someone is hired in some instances does not mean
Okay,
they
so
lose
they
their right
can
to
still quit. Sure. Okay, let's talk about T for a second. Substantial T 80%. Your card says 80% coverage is the threshold below which countries must develop national action plans. And like I and I talked about this in pre-round. Maybe I'm completely misreading this. If you wanted it to be 80% or above, it would have said the threshold above which countries must
Take a look at this card.
right? Am I losing my mind here?
Coverage is the threshold below which countries must
Yeah.
develop national
So
action.
below the threshold of 80%, not above the threshold of 80%. You've read an AF T card.
It's modified by substantially one.
Sure. Okay. Sorry, your card that says substantially all, that you shrunk all into 1.5, that card?
No,
That's the
it
modifier?
defines substantially. We think it means that.
No, you define substantially all. It's even in
and
quotes.
to be clear,
it's in quotes. It's
our
a
standards
substantially
are
all
about
means.
debatability.
So we don't have to be predictable at all. Cool. Democracy. Let's just gut check. Have you read a single card about Trump? Autocracy under Trump. Authoritarianism under Trump.
Yeah, Pascal 24.
No, wait. That's your. Which card is that?
Pascal 24.
Oh, sorry. No, that's impact defense. Well, your cards that say
like,
authoritarianism is good.
Defense of Trump
No. Your cards that say authoritarianism is good. Are any of them talking about Trump?
Wait, to be clear, our impact turn is about democracy being bad. We haven't read our list of.
You've said autocracy solves disease control. You've said it all over the 1 and 2. Are any of those cards about Trump?
We did not read a card that says Trump solves disease. No.
Okay, sure.
We will read cards in the 2 and C that say that, but also like.
Okay,
broadly,
politics DA, the internal link says that we need to defend against constant attacks that are coming in now from Chinese actors using ransomware. Why does that cause extinction?
Our clear evidence says that cyber attacks would invite tit for
Well,
tat.
no. That's your impact.
Yeah.
The internal link is about Chinese ransomware.
Yeah.
Why does that?
Impact
Why
card
do we launch
says
a nuke?
that leads to tit for tat escalation. Attacks on private
What?
actors cause U.S. retaliation.
So they
would
hack
escalate
like
our military
Microsoft and then we
facilities.
just launch a nuke at China?
No, so tit for tat means that there's more than one link to the chain.
Oh, tit
We've
for
skipped
tat,
over
yeah.
the multiple links in between those. Set.
So everybody good we're in the meantime?
Yeah.
Union's advantage. T 80%. T collective bargaining rights. Colonialism K. Advantage counterplan. OIRA counterplan. Hong Kong counterplan. Rates DA. Politics DA. Is anybody not good?
Yeah, give me a second.
Oh,
Okay, this actually makes it a lot easier.
yeah, that is better.
Trying to look at 3 people that are insects, like triangle style, is really annoying.
Okay. Good.
Yeah, we're good.
Awesome. Dropped antitrust impact. It solves extinction by regulating big tech. Otherwise, also totalitarianism and nightmare tech risks are inevitable. That's on weak. So no new block answers because it would say back to the 1AR. They've also conceded the civil service laundry list. It solves every impact. Governance is key to check vulnerabilities to impacts like climate, terror, food security, peace, and norms. That's a Shulman. Democracy outweighs one. Public goods, autocratic personalism, causes polarization and disasters, which collapses. Institutional response to AI, biotech, and WDs. That's battlefield 2. War transition collapse of the liberal order, causing unsustainable autocratic blocks to form, improved by Ukraine. That's ONIS. Independently, democracy constrains war. The only study that ignores confounders proves that EMI. Yes, the GPT is true. And they dropped the last 2 cards that Danny read. The one you see, it's the empirical record is overwhelmingly F. Even if we don't have awards, you should favor empirics because of the fact it shows what actually happens. It also says democracy is conducive to other factors that like development and treaties, which correlate with peace. Democracy does not prevent public goods. Their evidence is in short-termism, which is the status quo because that's what Trump cares about. But the civil service solves because of the fact it forces the government to care about long-term risks and science-based approaches that objectively solve. No maritime competition impact. It concedes a new treaty solve. Insert in yellow. It rejected card. It's miscited. The articles from 2020 and Mitchell's wrong. Democracy resolve disputes peacefully. Hong and Park 24 analysis shows democratic states peaceful means of resolution. Power. Potter says that significantly effective dies with significant Mitchell capability to seek the peaceful ways of resolving maritime place of tangible sales with divisibility making issues negotiable by parties anticipate more benefits of maintaining a relationship demand peaceful resolutions and conflicts called war teachers between UK and Iceland agreed to settle. Democracy assaults transnational pandemics and authoritarianism causing them are evidence used the largest data set ever compiled. Kemelmeyer 20. Viruses occur to authoritarian government interested in suppressing rather than addressing problematic problem democratic societies and effective dealing with major threats to freedoms related ability to cooperate when involved. They're really good at reducing their democracy, even without politics, foster trust democracy, adapt to ecological threats, examine and the dynamics of creative large data set of democracy, low pathogen, low democracy, high pathogen, finding secure accountability. As key authority, they're not reducing prevention, not ability and capacity to respond in the wake of crisis. Public officials are accountable as part of the agenda of everything democratic for one disaster, prepare the next, and the capitalism dramatically reducing authoritarian culture, give the higher causalities, lower productivity, society suffer economic trust, and chances of dangerous situation of response people, just institutions to keep a best interest in mind so everyone falls in line. Regardless, it's not offense because we have evidence that says the CDC independently solves for disease response, so democracy can't be bad. And no warming, turn mark quad. 25. Innovation, support governance, technical sustainability, creative openness, initial response, and closing narratives that like ambition, to decline democratic practices, wide inquiry, and knowledge directing focus on sustainability, provide reconnection and learning as well as bottom-up transformation, empirical evidence, suggesting innovation, outdoor participation, economic democracy, emphasis of work participation, provide mechanisms to redistribute power line for agency to address inequalities, challenge and fostering participatory democracy, and strengthening integrated within structural shifts. The democracy's economic power, the climate change conditions for mobilization, the conditions to be excluded, whatever populace to maintain sustainable models while undermining democratic principles or boosting movements and democratic models foster mobilization to legitimize action in contrast to authoritarian governance. Also the EPA solves because they conceded enforcing the CEA solves for all pollution. Yes, disease impact, one mortality pathogens mutate affecting every human, and overwhelming biological resistance that came to impact filter pandemics, collapse, cooperation, peacekeeping, and global investment causing the war. Their defense doesn't apply because burnout is fake because of mutations and zoonoses. No Trump impact. Trump Popo is not peaceful. It's escalatory because of the fact that he has no idea what he's doing, and his rhetoric is aggressive, which causes escalation. Yes, pollution impact can cause extinction, which causes emissions and disease, collapse the ozone layer, and renders everything infertile. That's fuller ozone holes and make the creep evidence is wrong. It's outdated and doesn't assume literally zero mitigation because the word is cleanup, but that's not the status quo. Kick aerosols, which means we don't need to answer the plank, T80%. When we meet a textually planned vacuum, so the objective and checks unfair positional competition be functionally the F protects more than 80% of the federal workers. Counter strengthening means make more likely to succeed in cause dictionary, more likely to succeed in the CBR refers to promotion of good faith bargaining errors. 85 good faith bargaining has been the essence of bargaining rights is universal definition. F ground they prevent providing rights to contractors, gig workers, and fed unions. Predictability. Danny shredded this in cross-ex. Their evidence says that below 80%, that countries with below 80% contractorship normatively strengthen CBR, not that it means 80%. They also define substantially all, which is not in the resolution. C the reasonability limits restrictions to nowhere. No offense functional limits like states, process, employment law, natural limits to check. F quantity independently cognizant of voting issue can give pressure theory and induces argument of accountability, which deepens research and solves time and strategy skew. T CBR. One, we meet a textually cross-play planar vacuum, and B, functionally at will is an effect because Trump violated good faith, and which means that all of those things would be overturned as a result of the plan. C, contextually, Michael's 13 government CBRs are being curtailed, jobs are being converted as at will positions, and Sinato inserted. 2, counter CBR requires good faith and negotiation to impasse Edwards. 85, good faith bargaining is the point of impasse over Trump's conditions have been over the essence of federally defined collective bargaining rights is the universally recognized definition of collective bargaining in the United States. Prefer predictability, it's universally recognized and it's over-limiting, which is bad. They didn't explain a violation, we get new answers when they do. Cross-play functional limits, reasonability, colonialism, framework. The consequences of the plan against unique, all with the competitive links, they destroy fairness and clash, which are both good in and of themselves to curb to both. Other choose allocate and overcome status quo, no ontology. Team 25, epistemology over politics, constraints, actions, activists, sponsor systems, forecasts, materials, tax, epidemics, more misapprehends. The actions of odds with the material realities are ready, injustice becomes attenuated, and cyclone demands. 3, extinction outweighs, it's irreversible, and consequentialism is key to evaluate trade-offs. 4, epistemic individual and international fiat is a voting issue because it justifies one piece. 5, constrained Trump is obviously worse for indigenous people. Advantage counterplan. 1, permutation to both, it shields the net benefit. 2, permutation to the counterplan. 3 is that it links to the net benefit because it probably does a ton of stuff that is unpopular. No staffing, they don't solve for disease because they only solve for awareness, which means we know about diseases but can't do anything about them because there's no staffing. And RFK, which shreds the counterplan, does not solve antitrust because they have no plan to even attempt to solve it, and everyone would quit, which is unsustainable. Rehiring fails, it's the status quo. Trump is trying, but he can't because they don't want to come back. The counterplan makes whiplash by making termination seem inevitable. That's Arkin. 25, and also publicly finding that he was reinstated limbo. The whiplash has not left him. Justin works have been fired and rehired have been remained in the director of justice administration. I pass on another opportunity to get terminated again to make a bad situation worse. They have a broken trust. It's confusing and chaotic. We need transparency. Also does not solve CBAs themselves are key because our handler says that that workers negotiate contracts in order to tackle problems into their CBAs, which the counterplan can't do by itself. It does, and the OIRA counterplan 1 perm to go, 2 perm to the counterplan as in 20 traditional policy writers you should recommend it should return the statement into advice other than rule. 3 permutation to the counterplan down the plan certain but not immediate. Brown 8 should look to the future. 4 return permutation to the plan and the counterplan over other issues. Danny can write a text. Counterplans can be through text and function maximizing engagement check exclude shitty counterplans incentivize German education. 5 no one shall not benefit. A spillover 1 instance can't set a precedent. B off solves the terminal. Rustfall kill the agency and it can't solve absent federal workers to implement their risk review. Concede the terminal. It's our offense. It can't solve a certainty without of course won't know whether the president is binding or not. That's Roberts and employs jump ship. Jacob jumps in. 25. Department spending its hopes on the course officers prefer to have the uncertainty about employment before making the transition. Say no. Ross Vaught and Trump would never agree to it. Compound counterplan 1, perm to both, 2, perm to do. The counterplan certainty is a key that was above. It shatters democracy. Riesenberg. 18 result could be to overhaul the owners, oppose a risk, and the employers' comment time to sign the Lorman Convention that represent a threat to democracy. Concon is a voting issue. There's no deficits that assume fiat, which is unfair. Rates this at 1. Perm do both, even if they try to solve uniqueness. All of these things already thumped confidence and high rates, which means the AF is wrong. AF turns a dollarization. Should be our structural deregulation to cause systemic collapse that overturns ability to regulate the economy, extinction from disease, ecological breakdown, and prolif. Mabiot. The 25 possibility of systemic collapse in the U.S. degradation of environment contribute to virgin crisis. I said it's all on regulation. Be protected from predatory activity. Regs that protect us from disasters, fires, with by future disasters impacts, include shocks escalating to the U.S. economic crisis when a pathogen more transmissible and deadly. The COVID vaccination may be inaccessible and cause spontaneous shutdown in its economies. Lose modularity. Regs and backup news less resilient to shocks amplify more rapidly disruption proliferates into disaster trying to entertain fantasies, which leaves the pulse to die when they party with Jesus. The common that is a breakdown of freshwater depletion of food collapse ABR and prolif. B is pollution. It collapses GDP through disasters and IQ loss. That's fuller. C is FTC prevents inflation. So then, and you're going to 25. FTC and imports price performing interest rate companies got hard charge prices. Trump party commissioners and to give to lawmakers that squeeze pandemics. D is pandemics. COVID proves and turns hikes. No link. It's stumped by decades pre-Trump and federal workers cannot even negotiate for higher wages, which means that there's no inflation link. No impact. It's inevitable. There's no U.S. keyword because it's other countries would solve innovation. To other countries would solve. Solves a terminal because we don't need innovation when we have strong government regulation. Rate hikes on key PETA. 22 narrative. Higher rates are kryptonite for tech is pitiful. As tools illustrated for explaining a change to stock empirical records contradicts narrative. Equities of no maturity. Their future earnings did not respond consistently to changes from rates of empirical data. This was shortcomings returns exhibit barely noticeable correlation with just 1% tech. Returns exhibit a weak correlation and changes in rates have no power over tech stocks. Politics perm do both. Thumpers Hill are actually. Durable node turns case durable fiat solves for rollback PC's fake under Trump Newell. 25 leaders are heard cancer for compromise leaders tool change voter also conservatives keep moving until Trump threatened to destroy their lives if they don't. Court action shields the plan's unpopularity. Craig and your 25 review interest against unpalatable policy Congress. Delegates to fraud with the policies of members can vote unpopular decisions study shield for difficult choices. Courts can cushion the blow. No cyber impact hardening. 24 government's response was fixing cyber tech and actually de-escalate options are slow because finding or crafting and waiting for it to take time if distributing can be consuming even if it happens to outreach and urgently have anticipated that filters are rarely clear rules on honor clear aspect rarely leads to conflict. No internal link.
That was cross-X.
That was cross-X. And rates. Public bargaining is key. Harris at 25 Trump 6 7 New York 7 the units of markets that's lacking unemployment discount. Gives cultural Trump rates for price of cost of goods to Trump strategy cost competence created across discount. On economy of business are uncertain to make up to 2/3 of the economy. Harris 25 marked at 2/3 of the economy.
Okay. Are you good for cross-X?
Yep.
Okay, this Hemmelmeyer card on disease, it says it analyzed the data set from 1949 to 2016. Our evidence cites COVID, which happened in 2020, and says that authoritarians were more effective. How does your evidence assume that?
Well, COVID is just obviously not empirics for democracy. Like it started in China, they weren't obviously able to contain it because it spread globally everywhere.
Also, hold on. Kellenmeyer, you're lying. The first 2 paragraphs of Kellenmeyer are about COVID. What are you
Yes,
talking
but then
about?
it says that the data set that you're analyzed, the
No,
largest data
it
set
says that the virus's
analyzed
rapid
data
spread,
from
referencing
1949 to
COVID.
2016.
It says that the virus's rapid spread, referencing COVID, occurred, quote, due to authoritarian government.
Occurred very early on. Our argument isn't that authoritarians are going to stop viruses from popping up, but that they're able to control them more effectively. I don't understand.
The next paragraph.
The data, the largest data set ever assembled. I just don't understand how that assumes.
Okay, so one, you're just obviously wrong. Danny red lines, it proves it's about COVID. Second of all, even if it doesn't assume COVID, that doesn't really matter because Kellenmeyer's data set is so huge that even if COVID is like, you think COVID is an empiric, it's like an isolated example and we should prefer a larger structural trend,
Okay,
which
that
are
makes sense. Short-termism on public goods. I don't understand why, under a world of democracy, people would be focused on long-term risks. The whole point of voter ignorance about the world is that they care about short-term things like their pocket.
So that does not assume our internal link about the civil service, even if voters are broadly incompetent. Our evidence says that public servants, leaders are lifetime bureaucrats, people dedicated to addressing these risks. Those people obviously are knowledgeable and they care
Also,
and they force the government to address them.
Revitalizing Democrat, like your uniquest.
importantly-
No, let me ask a question. Your uniquest claim is that authoritarianism is happening now. Trump is going to collapse with the voting populace broadly. I don't understand why you get to say like civil servants in the government care about
I
it.
don't
But
know
the
what you
voters
mean.
are still the people.
Also, voters are like not that incompetent. A lot of like, especially like young voters care a lot about stuff like climate change.
One of the cards like voters are totally ignorant. They have no idea what they're doing. Any influence in policy is
Our
bad.
public goods cards. But also, can I say the thing that I was going to say? Because this does answer your premise. The premise is like, even if democracy has some flaws, even if voters aren't exactly representative of long-term trends, authoritarianism, and specifically personalism, is
there's,
way
like,
worse.
clearly no
The authoritarians do not care about long-term trends. They care about doing things that they want to do in the short term.
Okay.
They think about politics in terms of their own lifespan, not future generations, which is way worse than
Which card do
democracy.
you have this as?
What? The personalism impact is in every single one you see democracy card.
Yeah, all the one you see democracy cards say authoritarianism.
No, onus. Onus is insane. It's so good.
Also, Belfield is clearly about totalitarians saying that they are worse than
Yes, Trump is
democracies.
our impact. This is the thing that
Okay,
we're
yeah,
gonna.
this
This
Trump
will be the two we
card-
are. You
this
have
card is about like foreign policy. It does not say
Nope.
that Trump does not care about short-term risk.
pulled
It
away
does
from
not say that-
development and environmental protection. I'm reading the lines. I have it up right now.
Okay, that's fine. Where does it say that he does not care about long-term risks?
Those are
He just-
long-term risks.
Yeah, those are. Do you disagree that like
Okay.
those are long-term risks?
Okay, fine.
What other risks are you talking about?
Was the only reason to reject the team conditionality?
No, we said alt fiat on K. If you do that, con, that might be it.
Okay. Sorry.
Good enough.
Like right in front of you.
Innovation outweighs fast tech and certainty fuels spacing, Sunday, cushioning all X risk, otherwise specific for material, existential, that's astronaut, that solves the case. Innovation enables rapid solutions to every single one is the impact of mitigating the impact of nuclear wars and spending is diverted to 1% of resilience. Trump obviously turns itself to terminals, extra mitigation is possible, asset strong incentive to innovate, and innovation enables solutions like disease, disaster preparedness, solution, etc. I'm not reading the impact part because they conceded the terminal, so obviously try or die nag. Now, do vote obviously links that benefit only sending fairly tested science funding plane, results of worse excessive deregulation, but further reacts sugar the DA kicking the rest of the planes together with the numbers that apply to the examples do not prove numbers. 1. Magnitude of link because no inflation because of weak bargaining rights in 2020 was far different, which will be read below to answer the fact that they need to specify examples of why it would have hiked rates in the first place, which they did not do. Then Monbia evidence 1. It's totally irrelevant. The counterpoint does solve incident buzz. Second, Monbia is not qualifying as a random journalist with no academic background. It does not speak to Trump's intent. 3. The app doesn't solve it because the warrants for deregs are Trump's political point. He's not him himself, but the warrants are wrong. Climate, she 24. The global emissions list will go to deny those emissions. US for 20% of emissions. China and the US, which is the allocation substitutes the US fossil fuels, lower prices, weaker consumer hypertonic, also the US affect those sons of the corruption, changing cloud cover, axial, tilt offset benefits, disease, political appointees like RK Jr. mean that you cannot solve it, they can have are historically rare. And if one happens, it'll likely be during a future advent by health agency fails. Paper 24. Commentators claim health care data, so conflict agency flexing during COVID agencies right through evidence for instructive pronouncement, disappear vaccine links, keep swollen, recovery, where analysts and community and trials, conference, and providing the authority for health regulation, dismantle the agency is good for growth throughout 25. Regulatory reforms that economic imperative, sense of relationships that economic potential by increasing costs, reacts $3 trillion in lost output that increase 2% GDP, reducing the regulatory burden, increase revenue, and annually perform at least economic community lower costs, detecting hammered by really aggressive actions against the data trust investment without down for the just stagnation with deficit low growth each other in a downward spiral. Now the next argument was the thumb, returning free Trump doesn't thumb the mere existence of the CBRs and federal workers. Obviously, is understood by the private sector the same as the plan's active bolstering worker power. The plan is ultimately reversibly. So it's best perception of future wage usage to replace the impact calculation before the plan. It's a total 180 from structural deregulation. The link, the pollution stuff is not about GDP, it's about GDP economics of the past, and there's no evidence that spills over, and it's totally minor. The FTC argument obviously does not link out ways and just as like companies could raise prices without they would do it, firms obviously would do it as a result of the plan, so the link is far more certain to it, and it's also way too long term, and our unique prices today in pandemics don't prove anything because COVID is obviously a different landscape, which already covers above below. The link debate proper, they totally mishandled it. They fucked spillover. They just said the Fed workers cannot negotiate to increase wages, but it's totally about perception, which chills the entire economy. One area with very little leeway because the liquidity was totally unresponsive. Regardless, spillover doesn't depend on federal workers increasing wages itself. All evidence about is largely about the perception of deunionization or lack thereof, which increases people to switch over to the Fed and public sector. But powerful federal unions, a lot of countries in favor increases. For 21 lobbyists hired through unions said their upkeep of Congress has legislative benefits government and workers, including pay increases. Otherwise, the act fails because lack of wage pressure waters down union power and makes it so that the Fed is unresponsive to the civil servants. The plan does spill over though. Siloed unionization is amended, wage increases are perceived. Nationally, industry unions observe power outside union power, showing outside option creating emissions. Feedback loop, more warrants. 1. Mirroring corporations and employees initially follow the Fed's push union. The plan precedent enables private sector unionization. outside option enables workers, all workers to bargain agreement, use of economic wages through vanilla and wages, meta unionization, through bargaining, the United States, social working any policy that raises workers as an outside option values, lowering wages and a wide set of workers that creates that outside option increases forms into seemingly disparate contexts to hike their wages, creating profit trade-off risk here. 22 CP terms reduce wages generating spillover wage response to the wage of the outside option raises firms have to increase wages to wage workers working for the police switch across international labor boundaries, creating dividends between firms that seemingly disparate sales by studies reveal spillover effects profit margins because that indicates a wage profit trade-off these non-covered firms. The next argument is once again just the thumper, which was largely answered above, and thumper for impact just obviously yes, US is key, they don't have evidence that other countries are innovating now to solve X risk for action better, and governance is irrelevant, so the case cannot turn the TA because it doesn't matter if we're not innovating because other countries don't give a shit because we don't lack the innovation necessary to actually lead anyone. Now 2025 is safe, but increased rate hikes devastate big tech and companies. So 2023 show we can take the companies in the future has an emphasis scale of technology and identity and used by lower price. But managing debts and growing profits often need borrowing when rates are low, when they give a refinancing and they lower their overall rates for and have to even manage debts well. The increase of 2020 are over, shut deals 23 times. Watching valuations triple unprecedented of a rock bottom, investors tend to money to Silicon Valley shorts valuation may be easy to expand Delta, and cheap money getting to the reality to be taken the NFL showing off trade. Very slow playing for cost of financing rates for the Silicon Valley, except Mexico, unless that reverses tightening. The last evidence is PETA. It concedes that investors subscribe to this belief, so the truth is obviously irrelevant if it doesn't impact stocks. Evidence about reduction in overall aggregate demand and investor risk taking, when other risks are directly impacted by stocks. So this is a non-starter, but once again, impact is totally conceded, so obviously it is try or die. Nay, the union thing. Starting off with big tech, we obviously do not drop it. It's straight away the DA and public good defense obviously applies because it's about democratic internal agency checks for regulated development, which our defense says is impossible under democratic norms. The only terminal is surveillance, which is identified as a quote X risk, no warrant for it. Their examples are about Israel and migrants, which are not existential. Yes, new answers to it is constructed. And 2 is explains the impact, so obviously they also just said totalitarianism, which is not a warrant, and the one is not going to blow it up. So surveillance, once again, not drop. This is just democracy. The people controlling upper government and the government listening is the premise of democratic norms. The biggest structural democracy, we always start defense at that as well, which obviously is public goods. Now, public goods do not solve anything. Voters are structurally ignorant, ignore long-term risks, and politicians are incentivized to be short-termists. Justify electorates independently special interest will cloud regulation, which is the border evidence. Authoritarians solves and enables collective survival. Her 22 individuals are getting value and authority of the dealing with threat, adaptation, pro-social function, facilitating objective goals, directed action, wealth, lack of immediate threats, terror, econ crisis, climate, COVID, individuals can carry out the vision is justifiable of solving collective problems. 32 community goals as they focus on impact rather than the nation's public obligation, authority, and existential threats are expected. Democracy are wired against sacrifice. So 23, Dems cannot handle future tests. Don't compare to sacrifice. They cannot see their responsibility as skeptical and forcefully making life better home for Dems. Rely will become some market short-term vision. They love all people who are majority vote generation of concern, all attracted by ideas. There are no future. Many hold on mistake believe that we have the obligation to stay practicing down their constitution slow down. Basic decision making and give way to minorities. Grants people, however, just and needed to connect to the future jazz. And short-term vision is not unique to Trump, rather future democratic norms. Bipartisanship prevents effective provisioning circumvents the other warrant that they have. Now, the Belfield of it is wrong. They're lobbyists and everything that risk will cause extinction. And it's uncertain if there's an impact. Belfield 23, while uncertain extinction is unlikely and recovery is likely. Now, it does not solve war in any capacity either. Peace is correlation, not causation. Past studies ignored autocratic illiberalism had no controls and relied on unsupported foundations. Past studies conclude that regime has no statistically significant effects to aggression. Backer evidence, it's not causal with peace. Backer 24, assumption that EVT that norms are meant to adapt enough for Russia and Chinese scored above midpoint in order to depend on all checks result in norms cannot be used. Norms are individually based but on socialized structure results are not equal to the that the other change pressure more effect by regime coalition to negotiate with Russia regime having no influence at best as a minor contributor, which means that all causes that way. Also 22 democratic needs to successfully research loss and critical how much of peace can down peace. Explain analysis of across time stable set of thresholds regardless of functions and peace will die as only function as democratic some other practice and cover the majority of peace or other independent warrants. One, public influence is assume voters care, which our evidence already disagrees, but more evidence by 18. Logical and entity assume peace movement based on like war to be nuclear possible to be stronger to get one. And the panel does not recognize as war and some countries that assume especially by people that from progress is great voters spread out based on extreme like Rams and offensive liberties being removed for those who do not. One leaders was punished in 100% of wars were killed down leaders to get off easier. The public is an idiocracy. Perfect 20. Why is democracy so unfair? Leaders are such things capable of trading into their lives, but the same leaders representing something dark and soul to people that promise the voters 21% to believe in wishes to do your numbers, leave in money, like in 5 years ago, believe had risen to 41%. Those are stupid ideas have disproportionate effects. Their studies are raw. Back 24, democratic pieces, empirical expos, divided research, divided related contradiction, do not someone the scholar begin with difference rooted in specific beliefs, each specific positive, sensitive beliefs. As athletes, religion, defending not speech to each other, scientific knowledge about peace is weak. The dwell evidence admits that premise that the relationship between democracy and war is purely correlated, not causal, so you should not risk the impact just because it's never occurred. And the other words also assume about like public control and liberal norms, which is done above. My evidence is neg 122. Democracy has a low conflict in my low others are retaliation experience and solution generating combination well is there 2 blocks that exist there for one low capacity low conflict. There's no specific tendency regularly due to this reason allow first to incorporate dyadic and nodal actions as well as temporal. There's no disease impact genetic diversity guarantees immunity, identity, lethality, kills before spread, and you can't get to isolate the region that's severe, run out fake in an assertion without a warrant, and mutations are obviously done by it, or evidence is far more predictive and actually back to PhDs. Even super disease can't cause disease in order 23, many schools existential virus you need to reach everyone and market certification strength and nuclear subs prepare. I'm carrying tries to reach parameters that untable divides need features into every human planet void. Aspirations of maintain some predictive mutation clearly not 99% of all matter, no matter contributing to need to like distancing. Patients and viruses, someone who doesn't leave their house. The evidence is neg. 1. Humans are safe for disease with lots of hundreds of mortality, which is most diseases. 2nd, 100% of mortality is easily preventable by logic. 3. The study is only about 5 diseases, which is inserted for reference. There's no ozone impact. Montreal proves circular economies. Reactive capital pollution trends are favorable. It's pretty bad. Best decisions to climate by the impact of those above, and I rate the impact depends on the defect stuff. But authorities are host agrees. Either 24 PV remains while safe armor space aerosol loading and was pollution increases adapted increasing towards safe level. The pollution stuff, no terminal impact, it's minor cleanup obviously solves the terminals are just environment. Basic switch on spillover innovation solves the terminal impact as well. Their impact starts at 1% anxiety, 15 ozone depletion. This threat is receiving thanks to meaningful action, extreme probability is 1%. It's fine.
Are you ready?
Yeah.
Okay. Rates link, spillover claim, before Trump, like new federal unions, public sector unionization was like 20-30%, private sector unionization less than 10. Why did not spill over that?
Well, it still lacks like the stronger, the broader process of CPR, compliance programs. Like spillover, even if it wasn't as big, is still true in the context of our.
But I'm asking, how could that be true at all, given that private sector unionization rates were like 1/3 of public sector unionization rates?
Well, so one is that private spillover is just one section, but the act of the plan, the option that reverses Trump's decision, signals to like workers broadly that under the old work political climate, they can have this like public outside public option that they would then run to.
What do you mean? You think that everyone would see the plan and then they would go then apply to a government job?
Well, it's an outside option that they know that sector guarantee and like definitionally would give that stronger market.
No, that can't be the link, because that would tighten the labor market. So then the Fed would cut rates to give companies more money to hire.
No, the argument is that they see that the perception of the federal workers having stronger union rights. Our evidence says that that's correlated largely with increases in things like wage demands, which that is the internal link to driving up prices.
Oh, so it's not that they go to the government, it's that they ask for more money at their own jobs.
Yeah, I mean that's the premise of spilling over to.
But they know, okay, public sector unions, it's like illegal for them to argue for wage demands. Why would private sector unions then argue for wage increases if they know that the public option does not have like?
Well, because presumably people still want to stay in their current jobs, but if they see that there's an outside option that is so much better and way more desirable in terms of the benefits they're getting, the wages, etc., that obviously gives an incentive to bargain with their own employers to potentially raise that.
But so you've identified that there's like your one evidence says that there's wage price spiral. I'm just like, why did this not happen when there was large public sector unionization?
Well, because it lacked the scope that we think the plan would cover.
But the plan just restores it to the pre-Trump status quo.
The perception that Trump is now flipping it, we think sends a green light.
What evidence says that there's like this perception about the plan?
We think the Smith 25 evidence, which is from this year, says that the treatment of federal workers is, quote, a bellwether for broader labor. It says that corporations actively look to the federal government.
It says Biden walked a picket line. So
yeah.
Why didn't a bunch of people join unions after that?
No, but like this is still predictive, and even if you win that.
But why didn't?
We're not asking about discipline. We're asking about thumpers. Why didn't it happen? Explain.
Well, the whole point is that like in the past there wasn't the incentive to do so, but the plan signal under Trump shows that there's a more pro-union labor stance, which incentivizes
Biden walking a
people to go
picket
over.
line is not the same as strengthening collective bargaining rights, which is what a lot of people.
Well, so it's predictive of like the status quo now. It says like as treatment of federal workers today get worse per Trump's XO, etc., so does the rest of the workforce. So flipping that is the signal to these other workers that they can go back to the public option.
Yeah,
It got really loud right when Trump stopped.
I said it, but I would Oh, he's not. Oh, I'm so stupid. I was just like, yeah. I was like confused for a second. Yeah, that's actually a good point. Okay.
He thought Dan was still.
No, I knew that he wasn't. I knew that he wasn't.
You sure?
Well, I at one point knew that. Okay, it's the advantage counter plan, the politics DA, the Hong Kong counter plan, the OIRA counter plan, the set call K, T 80%, and then the union debate.
Let's see.
We're good. Okay, you good?
No.
Oh, I just spoke for Megan.
You good, eh?
Looking for a case flow.
There you go. You good?
Okay, okay.
Advantage counter plan, KK, concede firm theory is a reason to reject the argument, not the team policy, KK, concede, court shielded, no impact, collective bargaining rights, legislative, not the court's flowering, 19 reordering the total CVR is a matter for the legislative, not the court's vote deck for position, the court of I-5 is clarifying that CIRs for public employees are a matter of legislation. Will concede that that's the gold standard. Plan in a vacuum is bad. It allows that to shift from debate to debate, which undermines detailed clash, and forces the two ends to give two NRs. The Concord counter plan, KK, concede the firm theory is a reason to reject the argument, not the team, the OIRA counter plan, KK, concede the firm, it's not their impact, they've conceded that OIRA is weak now because of a lack of trust within the federal government. There's no reason that staffing OIRA is key. They have sufficient staff in the status quo. They haven't heard evidence about OIRA not having enough staff. It's about use of their procedures in the government, which is low in the status quo, and their staff cannot overcome that. The SECO, okay, kick it, concede the firm theory is a reason to reject the argument, not the team. T, 80% conditionality is good. We get what we did. One is blocked to you. After changing the 2 which require multiple options. They encourage sandbagging, which undermines clash, and turns to you. 2 is neg flex. The neg is always reactionary to app choice and different practice the intrinsic of unpredictable advantage, add-ons, and deficits. 3 is arbitrariness. No difference separating models, no best basis for theory. And an unpredictable rule is worse than none, which always shifts the rules. Neg predictability. 4 is logic. Finds the best policy option. Disproving advocacies does not make the plan good. Skew and research are inevitable. Thumped by DAs and procedurals. Dispo is ad hoc condo. It makes app choice too powerful. Incentivizes process and playing spam. It causes research imbalance. The case. Maritime war outweighs on speed. Sea-based escalation is instantaneous. Nuclear mines and sea-launched missiles blur traditional fire breaks. Contrast favoring tactical nuclear use with no warning. Ocean fog ignites flashpoint before any check. That's our cautional evidence. No impact means it's game over. It is independent of democratic peace theory because it's about democratic states miscalculating over maritime conflict and not about whether they want to intentionally go to conflict. It subserves all of their defense. It outweighs and turns the case. There are floating war scenarios everywhere, but we have quick escalation with a specific vector for escalation that they do not have any terminal defense to. Treaties do not check. One is empirics. All large-scale maritime disputes have occurred between democratic allies. Oil and fish are the only bone of contention between democracies. That's our Mitchell evidence. Second is emboldenment. Treaties do not solve that. Laspisa 25. Dembo left to challenge status quo when it comes to maritime territorial norm. Does not influence maritime. No integrity measures have a negative effect on maritime membership in global orgs that call for peace. And target little effect. Coastal states members engage in conflict more frequently because they're less constrained by norms. Do not reject our 1 and C evidence. It was republished in 2023, which is the cutting we cut. That link is sent out. Inserted our link. Do not reject the card if they win this argument. Just assume our card was from 2020. It was from honest mistake. Now, democracy does drive maritime clashes. Liberal goals towards development and prioritization of property rights, and electoral pressures drive fleet modernization and resource militarization. Maritime conflict is 46% more likely than rising. Air negative, bivariate, and empirical modeling includes heavy causation. That's our Mitchell evidence, which is more recent than theirs. Democratic rivalries over salient resources escalate maritime conflict. Let's be 25 Dem engage in diplomatic and military conflict. There were 97 MNDs between democracies involved fishing, oil, and minerals. Dems was higher for maritime conflict in comparison to autocrats and mixed with corporations across city view and some development in most states not to live in borders for a certain level. Dems have more interest in maritime reason, more opportunities for interest that come under threat, so specifically could be conflict involved security interests. Maritime states essential to security to protect maritime security. Dems more likely to engage in interstate conflicts. It's a more recent study than their Daniels evidence. Their evidence responds to Daniel 17, but our evidence cites more recent statistical analyses. Now, democracy makes disease control impossible, and autocracy solves. 1 is coordination, develops authority, and lack of emergency causes ensures uncoordinated response, resulting in inefficiency and inaction. 2nd is public opinion. It'll be impossible to enforce quarantine or countermeasures without strict authoritarian lockdown. That's compatible with misinformation and democratic freedom. 3rd is speed. Only autocracies can immediately take control, repress opposition, and institute lockdowns. The difference is whether disease is contained in the early stages or spreads globally like wildfire. That's our limited evidence. Their card does not mention any data from COVID. It might mention COVID locally in the top, but it beats back against any. We have the largest data set ever because it omits the largest and most recent pandemic. 4 is communication to build support and ensures pandemic response. K21 authoritarianism is bond of the trade superior. So very prepared on time when China to SARS of governments communicating effectively a strong suit. We don't see democracy due to lack of public confidence leaders, high data from real population centralized decision-making, public support, and ability to share prices up advantage to the show to increase public support. Democracy, desk, warming response. We both agree that it's existential, and we control a far larger internal link. One is decentralization, deliberation is blocked by disagreement, and special interest climate deniers. It'll be impossible to enforce painful cuts to emissions if the public needs to sign off. Second is response. Democracies have no infrastructure or organizational capacity to completely shut down ecological shocks. The state must forcefully relocate ration food and quarantine disease, or we can't survive. That's naming. Third is perverse incentive. Dandy 25 democracies also society system are appropriate to misinfo leaders, economic responsible companies, employ taxes, lobbying, and false infographics. Most capital initiatives. These four policies are short-sighted policies to work instead of within blocks and democracy attacks, flow, and veto prices, impede decisions, climate and all. Rather than taking the monetary term climate action and not make sense of clean like this political movement and policy officials worried about economic development. The EPA does not matter. Global autocracy is far better. EPA is checked by short-termism and voter imbalance. That was the public goods debate in the 2 and It's the same for the CDC. Solving climate change, solving disease. Democracy cannot solve because it will never have popular support. China 24. Our Senate literature indicates authoritarians possess the political and centralized policy making, limits the influence of opposing action, not pressure to prioritize short-term benefits, climate mitigation, against opposition from both citizens and industries. An authoritarian Trump will impose climate regulation. Bodomowski, 21. The eco-right formation of climate coalition across party lines. Peaceful, energetic, civil enterprise influencing Republican lawmaking. GOP leaders are pivoting eco-right routes and deciding to protect people from harmful duties of pure sustainable energy, future economic leadership, eliminating tax on zero low emission forms of energy, specifically nuclear. Spencer 6-9. Trump CEOs to expand U.S. nuclear energy. We need to do more. Need to overhaul how it fuels reactor yields not assuming existing and bureaucratic structural process lays down forever. That will achieve policy revolution. That avoids warming. Matthew 22. Clean energy, shifting from fossil energy, nuclear power, great potential delivers warming, reliable, affordable, clean energy support growth without large nuclear energy would not be possible to combat climate change. No Trump foreign policy. In fact, frame out the DVD stuff above, but he has not done anything bad yet. And each decision he's made has increased stability. Things like not pulling out of NATO and pulling out of Ukraine proves that he's pro-peace and anti-war. He doesn't start random wars. Grade 24. Trump's actual foreign policy record should make the warning time. Ruler of in reality. Trump chose not to undertake foreign interventions or allow American deterrence to be lost. Lack of local was not an accident. It was a deliberate reaction to Trump. America refocused on peace in the Middle East and the Balkans, built the Quad and rebalanced troops in favor of friendly Europe and Pacific. Trump policies were of pragmatism and growth and united the world was under Trump. It also the public goods and authoritarian defense above a response to all the non-war impacts in their piece of evidence. Trump solves warming, LB 212, renewable energy fine, uneffective favor geothermal with bipartisan political support to hurricane energy debate offers electricity by the heating the planet. Even if there's intent for regulation or democracy, lobbies to lose solvency. Loan 25, democratic decisions based on constraints, policy fragmentation, economic pressure that hinder action and influence from actors, initiative that environmental government thinking compromise that dilute effectiveness for electoral substance and by policy yielding immediate benefits of democracy policies on power leading to robust authoritarian regimes of great flexibility, democratic, bureaucratic intervention, political dialogue, checks and balances, slow decision, making authoritarian regimes rolling out, initiative with divisions that just control push through.
Cool. Mark the long card of centralized control. 10.
Okay. It's the politics DA, the OIRA counterclaim, the rates DA, and case.
Can I get that one more time, sorry?
Politics, OIRA, rates, case.
I haven't had any of that.
There's only one doc.
Oh, there's one doc.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
I
It was sent. Let me know when you got it. Yeah, only one. Okay. How we doing? Mission good?
Yeah.
Panel? I looked at Dan and said he's judging, and we're good. New team, the one in ours, a reverse voting issue that's a rebuttal, not a constructive and improper causes insurmountable one our time pressure, independently, it's wrong, collective bargaining station, agnostically, 11 people bargaining, governed by laws or regulation decision, the courts can have no deficit, including limiting fiat to Congress causes courts overturn to break durable fiat reasonability, dropping to prevent self-discredit, judge intervention is inevitable. Now the OIR accountable, yes, straight turn, live more, evidence is agency rulemaking, screens out existential risk, which means they are at a terminal to our civil service impact, it is extinction via emerging tech, which means it also solves the terminal impact to rates, the one in our answers are all lying, no card to support any of them doesn't say, public trust is key, the 2EC never said that, we said capacity under Rust Vought, which is unique uniquely key in the plan, enables it via collective bargaining, drop the plan, staffs the OIRA, which ensures solvency. The last argument was process key, which is a lie. The Livermore evidence is methodological reform is not key, but agency staffing is. This is there. I want to see Livermore Carter insert green. Now, the rates DA case turns the DA fast and the inverse can be true. No internal link. Rates are not key to innovation. Spikes. Funding spiked in 2022 with all-time high rates, and innovation is largely inevitable. U.S. not key. They have no card. The investment here is causal, especially with international corporations that can just relocate production to other sectors or countries of the world with lower interest rates. Rates are not key to tech investment, which is low. Filter 24 $50 treasury easy curve, waste much higher than New York speaking industry following at the high effects of IPOs and investors. More selective pays up exercise body markets with lower racial appetite for investors, but other macro factors have a greater influence over investment in biotech. No impact. It can't solve the case because more tech doesn't equal more governance capacity, and bunkers are structurally irrelevant because nuclear war still causes extinction via radiation. Now, hikes are inevitable, and only the plan solves. One, independence. It's the bedrock of growth and market confidence. That's stern. Two, structurally trumps collapse of the government, makes institutional response to threats impossible. Warming, pollution, the CFPB, and pandemics causes system-wide shock to supply chains and consumption that overwhelms defense. That's the Montreal evidence. The administrative state is good for growth and conceded that want to see evidence that Trump kills the BLS and the Fed, which makes economic regulation impossible. And Cooper 23 state power protect accounts underpins the entire economy. Business and state land status is created by the state money maintained by agencies who powers the shipment of products and infrastructure pulls out by government to regulate. When government fails to oversee the result of routine disaster, government will be there with a rescue SVB and away pandemic economies would have been polluted crisis worth in the Great Depression. 3, impact pollution causes GDP loss in the trillions. Disease causes shutdowns. COVID proves both cause structural constraints that deter inflation. 4, federal workers. Trump's own executive consolidation causes a labor market shortage, inflation from tariffs, and a collapse of business and consumer confidence. Only expanding union density threats institutional ability to create a stable regulatory and labor environment. That's our Harris evidence. Public sector employees with unions decrease inflationary pressures because they earn less. Joe by 25 salaries are lower than the private sector. The jobs of greater stability, predictable schedule, salary, promotion, representation, and benefits. Yes, obviously before thumps. That was 2 and 2 cross 6. There's Smith evidence, which we will concede since Biden blocked the picket line, which should have been a signal, which thumps the perception link. Federal unions can't bargain over wages or sue. 25, the government employees cannot negotiate wages. The private sector is the first mover. Public wages are reactionary. Dalton 24 sector leads protect wages are versus relation to public sector wages. Just the private sector, public sector pays catch up with private sector earnings. Either way, agencies can solve because they can so they can fund new innovations. Now, the union's advantage. Civil service outweighs. It is not just democracy. I want to see Schumacher evidence is explicit that regardless of environmental and voter preferences, well-staffed agencies deter a litany of crises as economic collapse, nuclear risk, and diplomacy, and a confluence of structural threats as they have read the impact to us for both on OIRA and on the rates DA independently. FTC outweighs public good. Defense does not apply. It's not about democratic goods, but corporate regulation. Surveillance outweighs. It spends structural repression and causes war via regime changes. For our same rule evidence now, democracy impacted outweighs structurally. Public goods outweigh autocracy, causes miscalculation and polarization, locking in existential AI, biotech, and WDs. That's our Belfield card. Structural peace independently. Empirics prove that democracy constrains war. That's my defense does not assume transition risk that fragmenting the world into escalator blocks. That's our niece evidence that postdates all of their cards by 3 years. Preferred magnitude. Democracy structurally filters out risk. So the status quo is unsustainable and always a worse bet. Independently, democracy bad is structurally unwinnable. Michigan has card 0 that Trump solves any of their scenarios, which impact towards all of their offense because they assume benevolent autocracies. Not Trump. The Trump foreign policy defense is literally all 0. It is all cards from the elections DA last year pre-election. Doesn't assume tariffs, Iran strike, Lebanon strike, or Venezuela strike like 3 days ago, which makes our offense try or die. And I want to see impact cards from 25 predictive of Trump foreign policy. No maritime scenario, norms check, no reason why it goes nuclear. Lapisa says democracy challenges institutions, but that's solved by the civil service, which recommits us to diplomacy. Every other Lapisa card is a thumper. Past maritime disputes and escalating our structural DPT argument says that constraints still solve. Industry capture is backwards since war is bad for business. So the lobby for restraint or back down during dueling claims. Democracies peacefully solve maritime disputes. Han 2, democracy likely to fight due to structural change and initiate conflicts on a file less for the small democracies will both go into democracies not like the militarized. Mitchell concedes they are settled. Want to see Mitchell 23 maritime conflicts over democratic more likely successfully settled through multilateral institutions. The collection is correlation, not causation. Democracies are better for all other wars. Pisa and Mitchell 25 pairs of democracy face low risk for interstate conflict. Coastal states are more democratic than landlocked states. Coastal maritime claims are more democratic. Independently concede warming is not anthropogenic and far off and insignificant on rates, and the disease is not existential in case. No terminal impact now to most of the one in arbitraries. Our structural offense outweighs public goods. 1, framing issue. No alternative. Autocracy is worse than the Trump explanation above. 2, incentives for transparent explanation and adhering to treaties and agreements, which is our Belfield evidence. Outweigh the audience costing is wrong. Citizens care. Concerned all 19 members. The public expect knowledge are intuitive theories and political sticks and actions we see as likely to stand firm. Citizens carry folk deterrence. Responses are stable. Audience costs wrong. Citizens restrain leaders and misguided 23 becomes democratic. Citizens suffer losses. Loss of threatening the incumbent generating audience costs non-democratic and advantage of competitive democracies. The risk of officers comparable democracies. Autocracies getting manipulated results. Changes to crisis grounded audience costs need distinction to generate costs and risks. But they also democratically backed leaders are far less hawkish. Hunt 23 leaders. Being less cost of fighting. There's game more rewards relative to the followers. Exhibit higher probability fall. Playing the followers are more peaceful. Monarchy support for the prediction of democratic peace increasing. Followership resulting in decrease in the hawk strategy. Down such a well supported nature leadership. Game benefit priority from access to resources. DPT is true. Heritage 19 DPT is durable funds in the history of other versus use the data consider cost a larger more precise fashion greater participation in a current situation executive reduce conflict civil society influence audience cost stable because the one different forms of accountability. Yep. Bailfield and does not assume Trump 3 years later. Also work is nonsense. It agrees democratic diets are more peaceful while other peaceful diets exist. No shit. Oh, sorry, 21 democratic. As opposed to non-democratic diets, less likely to word democratic peace. But a strong condition for peace. Now the rest of the defense they read is wrong. Lobbying wrong. Democracy solves. Autocracy is worse. Mueller 23 powers concentrated absence of accountability. Issues competing in action to be just powerful and common. Autocracy of authoritarian regimes or manipulative techniques impossible. Shift over authoritarian decision making would likely make things worse. My modeling card says nothing. It's summarizing variability in other studies, not the one we're citing, which my controls for in the previous study. It concludes the DPT is still true. That was the sidewalk indent was answered above. Empirics proof democracy stops conflict. Baconi 17 democracy helping common challenges of face and empirical evidence. Democracy basic weapons for human peace and least committed key rulership had democracy. Government customer positive extremism, security, democracy, traffic, perfect democracy. Mark the card at democracy. No terminal impact to any of the wars, and the 2 and C means it's structurally triad because they have constrained it. Drop the plan stops the DOS, which ensures diplomacy, which mitigates every single conflict, making it structurally triad out.
The order is the case, or actually, rates, politics, order, case.
Sure.
Rates kick and concede numbers, and that rates are not key to innovation in other countries that have only solving innovation. That means that status quo solves the impact of the GA because it does not substantiate democracy as key. Public TCA, not going for T, not avoiding issues in this response to a TCA argument, and every argument excuse the money average, the argument, not the team, or a kind of play, not an add-on to civil service. 1. Public goods. Defense answers it. If democracy cannot deliver, then there's no reason that Oya solves anything. Second, staffing is not key. The real says nothing. It says that the agency itself is key, but the whole point of the counterpoint is that Oya legitimacy is low now, and the counterpoint revitalizes the plan alone does nothing to revitalize legitimacy, which is the key internal link. 3. No evidence that Oya is understaffed now. Google search confirms they only have 50 employees, which isn't enough to meaningfully stop extinction in any capacity. The case. Maritime conflict outweighs. It's the only impact in this debate that does not have terminal impact defense, so it is try or die neg. 1. Speed. Sea-based escalation is instantaneous. Nuclear mines and sea launch missiles both language conventional nuclear escalation. Countries favor tactical nuclear use over the sea because of uncertainty miscalculation. Ocean fog ignites nuclear flashpoint and instantly escapes as cultural evidence. Democracies are more likely to go to maritime conflict, which is a tiebreaker for generic war defense. 1. Empirics. Every large scale maritime defense between democracy. The Cod Wars, the Turbo Wars, the Northwest Passage, and the Tuna Wars. That's Mitchell. 2nd. Stats. 5 area. An empirical model uses heavy causation analysis concludes that maritime conflict 46% more likely and only rising between democracies that use heavy causation analysis that confirms that it results as Mitchell. 3. Resources. Democracies care more about resource extraction to placate the populace. From 1946 to 1992, there were 97 militarized disputes between democracies, half of which involve fish, oil, and offshore mineral resources. 4. Economics. Democracies have more substantial economic interests in maritime regions and fishing fleets because they have higher levels of economic growth as they limit their borders and are more vulnerable to attack. They've also dropped that our scenario is totally insulated from DPT, so all our defense is circumvented. Even if democracies do not intentionally go to war with other democracies or scenarios about miscalculation from unintended maritime encounters based on resource extraction, that means that it circumvents all the defense that I will do below. Drop our carded answer to norms check. Or evidence says that norms are unable to solve that even through democracies are integrated into global organizations that hasn't constrained them from being aggressive in the maritime domain in the past, framed through the empirics link, past diffuse, do not escalate because they were small scale and countries were still democratizing, but our evidence is that the risk grows over time as democracies push for more and more fleets. Hot evidence from 2002. It doesn't list any structural constraints by name. Our emphasis is that there are statistical real world reasons conflict will escalate extended above. The Mitchell rehighlights that the conflicts are likely to occur between democratic states, which flows negative. The multilateral institutions war was answered above. The next term says that coastal states are more democratic, which is our argument. They're more democratic, so more likely to escalate conflict than authoritarian landlocked states in the first place. The move Trump stepped to the top. It does not bring, it does not flip impact, uniqueness, or calculus. 1. Conceded that he's broadly rational with foreign policy, so that means that he would solve maritime conflict. You know, have evidence that says he wouldn't. 2nd, he's broadly rational. He did not pull out of NATO and he did pull out of Ukraine, which is that he is anti-war. 3. Drop that Trump solves war. He gave us nuclear and geothermal and eco right on the rise that proves that authoritarians are broadly able to solve existential risk, and it proves that he's not everything in the launcher list can be true. Have skepticism towards anything because Trump is broadly a rational autocratic actor, and they don't have evidence that he's meaningfully different from any other actor, and they have to explain what functional difference between him and the rest of autocracies matter in the context of extra mitigation, which is basically the only other thing they have. Now, public goods defense I'll start with big tech. This is obviously not external from any other public goods stuff. It's about internal agency checks and broadly through democratic norms. Just because corporations may be distinct does not mean that democracies don't apply. It's still about the ability for democratic states and norms, largely, and lawmaking to constrain them. But it also doesn't matter because autocracies can equally check big tech companies in the first place. If they don't have computer evidence that it's not true. Civil servants, once again, that was answered broadly on rates, but this is also just democracy. There's no functional distinction between civil servants constraining government and just broadly people voting in people they prefer, etc. This is also just a total non-server because every other defense argument means that even if civil servants are effective at controlling the broad sense of democracy and extra mitigation is unlikely to happen in the first place, which is indicts all above. Now, no public goods impact at the top. Porter says that voters are equally likely to ignore the long-term extras because they're cognitively biased against it, and politicians are also short-term. It's a feature of democracy, not just exclusive to Trump. But democracies also encourage special interest groups that constrain effective regulation, which is totally conceded, which means that co-opts any effective policy making, which is a terminal check on conflict. Hirsch is comparative and says that authoritarians are actually more capable of solving collective problems, which is totally conceded. They may have democracies good for public good, but they do not have answers to autocracies also solve. Their studies focus on the impact portion, but not the cooperative nature and management of said collective action issues. The 10 also 23 evidence says that Dems ignore future gens as well, and incumbents are, quote, marked by short-termism. The constitutional process of checks slows down progress, and this is a direct impact to civil servants as well, because that process is what prevents actual effective policy making, so the checks and balances are totally irrelevant. Bipartisanship also ensures the policy stalls. Since there's compromise is near impossible in today's climate. The Belfield indict also applies. It says that they're unlikely and we can recover since they're so long-term. Just because it is about Trump doesn't matter, because Belfield was writing about it in the context of long-term and express mitigation broadly, so Trump does not flip uniqueness, which is also answered above. The war stuff framing issue is correlation, not causation. We are winning near 100 risk of maritime conflict, and that is a distinct factual independent of TBT. So even if they have some backing, TBT is equal likely that it's totally luck, because no effort says that it is actually causal. Backer says that past studies have ignored automatic liberalism, no control variables, and were based on unfounded assumptions. There's no difference between regime types and starting wars, since aggression is not motivated solely by democratic norms. That's true of the US, China, and Russia, which proves that we're now the only ones that have studied the relevant political climate, because only our evidence references those three nations by name, and they're the only ones that we go to war in the first place. Lastly, it's specifically robust to the conclusion of no influence, and it's the only study for 24, and our evidence says that you should prefer it. Trump does not change anything, which is stuff I did above. Last week says that multiple causes are unrelated to democratic constraints. Only 27% of diets are even qualified as true democracy states, so their stats are just inflated, which is the antisemitic indict. The best other war is public influence. That's wrong. There's no evidence that workers would pay attention in the first place. They don't want war, and they aren't susceptible to other biases. The U.S. has frequently gone to war as a democracy, and limited public outcry was too late to stop anything with disparate causality. Lastly, both Dems and autocrats have similar chances of being removed from war. If anything, death got off easier since 28% of autocrats are killed. The public is also full of idiots. People know nothing about lives, but what they care about. And 21% of the Americans believe that witches exist, which means that those people don't know anything about stopping Trump from escalating wars. The conservatives is wrong. It doesn't say that Americans would not move war, just as they understand deterrence logic, but that doesn't mean that it translates to the ballot box. Audience cost is stupid, but our cardio buffers that no one cares about in the first place, so there's no reputational cost in doing so in the first place. Most Americans now don't care. The mosquito evidence is solely about audience cost, which is invented above, subsumed by evidence above. This isn't caring about regime stability outweighs any potential outside interference for autocratic leader. No reason audience costs constrain hunt evidence, PhD candidate, but also just about authoritarians in theory. But our evidence is comparative and says that authoritarians that are still able to solve divorce excess of the impacts. The Heger evidence is far too old to study. Our evidence is far post-states and assumes that indicts that they've done the Comey and evidence we've indicted empirics alone. Obviously, democracy leaders play a role, but it does not prove that autocrats cannot do it. And our epistemic indict is all the backer stuff above, so you should reject their cards.
14. Civil service outweighs everything try or die frames are about. We conceded there, Livermore evidence that says catastrophic risks are structurally inevitable. The card name drops risks like advanced AI, asteroids, WMDs of every flavor, and bioengineering that you know is certain to emerge in the status quo. Both sides agree that extinction is the most significant impact in this debate because we both forwarded claims with that impact. So the thing that matters most is whether or not the civil service can solve, which they have no defense to. Here is how you decide this debate. We have several inroads to our to overwhelming structural impacts that dictate the direction of try or die, while Michigan is at best going for a loosely supported internal link turn with no uniqueness. Independently, even if you don't want to vote on that, they've dropped that the plan solves the rates impact. The bottom of the 1AR said that agencies can fund innovation, which the 2NR completely concedes. Thumpers and rates.key bolster the risk of solvency even more. They dropped that a lack of staffed agencies means that the economy collapses entirely, which is critical to innovation, which means that we have inroads to their terminal of technological disaster that they conceded is extinction. Yes, OIRA stuff is an add-on. First of all, is that we do not even need to win this. Independent of the OIRA agency in particular, we have a civil service impact that is totally separate from democracy. It's the Schulmacher card and the 1AC, and that says civil servants bypass every single reason why their democracy defense is wrong. Regardless, or the rehighlight in the 1A is fantastic. You should read after the debate, and it is very clear that this is offense. First of all, the 2NR tries to say OIRA doesn't solve anything. This is an illegal takeback. We specifically conceded their card in the 2AC and said that it solves a litany of existential risks, which means the 2NR cannot double back on that because concessions shape AF strategy. Yes, it says staffing, the AF definitely solves it because of the fact that we increased staffing by bringing everyone back and saying that Trump firing everyone was an illegal violation of the CSRA. They've also conceded that the reason why OR legitimacy is low now is because Russ Vought is taking a sledgehammer to the agency and ruining all of its priorities, which only the app solves through concretizing those demands in the CBAs and revitalizing unions. The legitimacy low is app inherency because of the fact that we agree that the government sucks now, but the plan is obviously key to resolve it. Now, I don't know why Michigan keeps asserting that we didn't read impact events in maritime conflict, because we've read like 5 cards, the one here recount both pieces of the evidence that the term relies on, and both include shockingly aft. Mitchell says that conflicts are, quote, structurally more likely to be settled through multilateral institutions. One here, Hahn says that democracies are less likely to fight with a, quote, structural constraint on escalation, and that even when fights do break out, they are less violent. That also means that none of the DPT war stuff, it can be offense in the 2NR because of the fact that there's no terminal impact to that, and they have no evidence that any of those things escalate. No speed, drop analytic defense, and there's no incentive for it to go nuclear, and that all of their impact cards are thumper cards because they list myriad past disputes that democracies should have thumped and should have escalated in the past. The Lapsia evidence says that democracies have lower risks for interstate conflict in general, which obviously does mitigate it because of the fact that it says that, because even though the 2NR says that the turn is external, it's just not true because of the fact that we cite empirics that says democracies are less likely to fight, which includes maritime conflicts. They've dropped that the plan solves because the staffing service enables diplomatic resolutions to conflict. That was the bottom of the 1AR staffing. Agencies like the DOS means that we can resolve and negotiate instead of fighting. Most importantly, they've dropped our straight turn to the lobbying link. The 1AR said that lobbyists incent conflict, and the 1AR said it's flat backward because war isn't profitable, so they advocate for restraint, which the 2NR had no ink on it. It's certainly terminal defense to escalation, but also net offense because they said that democracies permit lobbying, but dropped that lobbying is a force for peace. Empirics are irrelevant. The fact that war didn't escalate in the past proves democratic peace, and that there's no terminal impact to it. Now, democracy bad can never be a winner. One is that they have no evidence that assumes the civil service and conceded the plan's internal link to solving it. Even if the 2NR's words are that the public is dumb and that elected politicians have incentive to prioritize, but even if when that is absolutely true, that is not defense to the civil service scenario because none of their evidence assumes a scenario in which the government is staffed with career bureaucrats that are experts in all of these fields and care about these subjects, which means that there's no internal link to, or there's no reason why the public being dumb or elected officials matter because of the fact that they don't have agency to influence decision making when the civil service does. Second of all is that there's no alternative to any of this. The 2NR has basically gone for 6 minutes of Trump good, which is obviously unworkable, and that they can't go for any of their defense for this. Trump is not broadly rational. They dropped the 1AR indictment of all of their cards out there before the election, which means it does not assume recent attacks like him deciding to attack Iran on Israel's behalf, which is clearly not anti-war. The first card is a CEO guy who's glazing Trump, obviously has incentive to puff him up because he wants to make money. The second card is from July and is complaining about cancel culture, which is obviously conservative trash. The third card is a writer for the national interest with no qualms and is writing a puff piece about the DOD, which is just not a defense at all, which and proves that Trump uniquely causes escalation per our own evidence because he's uniquely destabilizing and his aggressive rhetoric causes escalation. Even if they are right that Democrats ignore the future, agency officials themselves are nonpartisan, and the plan solves for the process of effective policymaking, which means that there's no terminal impact to democracy being bad. No other variables that they've conceded that the Belfield card, the section of the Belfield card that they cut doesn't matter because it's from 2023, which obviously cannot assume Trump's second term destabilization of war. Democracy, yes, democracy solves up for war. They've conceded the warrant that other variables, that even if democracy itself does not explain peace, that it is conducive to other variables that do. For example, democracy increases economic development, which causes overall peacefulness and means that countries are more likely to engage in treaties and be cooperative overall. So even if there is democracy itself doesn't have a correlation, it does have a causation through other impacts. Regardless, the empirical record is so overwhelmingly apt that you should be able to willing to accept correlation because it is simply so strong. No, all causes, true democracies don't matter because it's linear. The more democratic you are, the more peaceful you're likely to be. Public is not full of idiots. They know deterrence and they care about things. That's the cursor evidence. Yes, it translates to the ballot box because they don't like the war. The De Mosquito evidence says that audience costs are absolute because people really care about their life being messed up by a war, which means they impose it on audience, on elected officials and won't go to war. The problem with the 2NR is that none of it assumes civil service. Most of it is defense, but it doesn't assume our internal link of bureaucrats who are smart, they care. It doesn't assume any of the ones about the public. We have structural triad because we conceded their impact, so extinction is inevitable in the status quo, and you shouldn't vote to kill yourself.